Home inspectors of Reddit. What are some horrible things that almost went unnoticed? I'm sure there will be some stories about wiring above drop ceilings. When I was looking at houses, I saw, not the home inspector, one once where like 10 different wires came into one rat's nest of a cluster. To make it even better, there was a regular lamp cord that ran from it to power the hanging kitchen light above the table. And if you want whipped cream and sprinkles on that, the power came into that mess through knob and tube. Not a home inspector, but I did ask our home inspector what crazy stuff he had seen over the years. He had 2 stories. He inspected a modest 3-bedroom house and found that were very strange structural cracks in the walls. The area where the house was built is primarily clay soil, which leads to a lot of foundation issues, but these were really abnormal cracks. He headed to the attic to wrap up his inspection. It was located over the garage, so there was absolutely no structural support there. He poked his head up into the attic and couldn't believe his eyes. The owner had a fully furnished man cave in the attic over the garage. It had a couch, big screen TV, weight set, and a huge gun safe. He said he had no idea how in the world all of that stuff didn't come crashing down through the garage ceiling, or how the guy had managed to get the giant gun safe up there without some sort of elaborate winch system. He said it was only a matter of time before the house collapsed. The only other weird thing he encountered was a cistern, an old well, in a crawlspace underneath a house. He said he was crawling along on his stomach when he almost fell into it. It was left uncovered. Not a home inspector, but inspect appliances sometimes. Came to a house when the owners were out for vacation for another week and their water heater was leaking into their 2nd-story attic. I had walked into the garage and heard a small waterfall going on and found their ceiling waterlogged and fallen through with the pipe spraying down. Called the owners but no answer, so we turned off the water and left it at that. Not an inspector, but the former owners of our house had rigged a live wire coming off the house and attached it to the shed lock in order to try and shock any would-be burglar. Not a home inspector, but my best friend has his own architecture firm. There was a house he was asked to look at to do some renovations on it. It's this big house, so he get the plans and notices some odd stuff. Dig in and find the whole house had been built up around a mobile home. Mystery switches, seen a few where they bury wires in drywall mud as makeshift heating coil, completely asinine fire hazard and will chew through power like crazy. Definitely tell them to disable before moving in. But all sorts of stuff. The facelift meth house. There is just place they without fail don't clean. So essentially someone cooks meth inside, they paint everything, redo carpet, etc. But a good way to catch it still is pop off furnace intake, reach inside a good ways and swab there for testing. Couple spots on furnace if it doesn't look replaced. And last but not least, electrical panels. For obvious reasons, people are not taking wet rag and rigorously scrubbing inside the cover of electrical panel. Remember, inside the door some will wipe outside. Seen a few beautiful, quite passable former meth houses still get caught and many more missed. Most big stuff obvious, rarely missed, and pretty obvious. Especially if you know what to look for, and probably most common misses are usually hidden but smaller, but once again it's knowing what to look for. For example, minor leaks or water damage. Slow leak or perhaps seasonal. You get smucks that coat it with a little mud, a fresh coat of paint. Obviously can't catch them all, especially if they do a more comprehensive remodel. But go in front room, notice only one wall's freshly painted. Look closer, might see some cracks or swell spots, a light tap and it starts peeling, etc. Look for new mismatched, then beware problem spots, places where leaks are common like around dishwasher. And just pay attention, listen for squeaks, test everything casually. A lot of time it looks like we're just walking around. But hear a squeak, shift weight back and forth. Open a door, close it, checking reveals gaps, function of door. Not an inspector, but I've done work on a friend's house. He knew there were issues and I was trying to patch up a bunch of things. I noticed a lot, but an actual inspector came through and while did note a bunch of things that really need to be addressed, but missed an electrical connection in the basement. I mean, the wires were really coiled up in there. It was right under one of the bedrooms, and if you walked up to it you would see how bad that thing looked. He has a wood stove for heating, so there were vents in floor for heat from the basement to reach the top floor. The connection was right next to a vent into his bedroom, nowhere near the stove, so it wouldn't be an issue. He wakes up at 5 a.m. a little over a year ago and said it was like a blowtorch was going through the vent. He opened a window to get some air, then went around pulling his wife and 4 kids out of the place. They got treated in the COVID-19 ward at the hospital, right at the start of the pandemic, and they were treated for smoke inhalation, so that ward had everything. Fire department determined that the fire started from that electrical connection. Completely destroyed the basement, and if my buddy didn't get up when he did, it could have been a far worse outcome. Most of the electrical was absolutely terrible and clearly dangerous. So at least one inspector didn't spot it as dangerous. Not an inspector, but had some friends that were about to close on a house but decided to have an inspector check it out first. The inspector heard rustling in the walls and saw a snake in the basement, so he recommended they call some sort of specialist. I don't remember what kind, I think it was something to do with animals, but they found snakes all in the walls. Like thousands of snakes throughout the house. Definitely did not end up buying. House shopping back in 2019. Found a cute little refinished house. Turns out, they never connected the new AC unit to literally anything. Mold for days. All through the attic. All through the walls. They also didn't check the attic vents, and the trapped moisture causing the mold was compounded by the lack of ventilation. Also, the inspectors were trainees. My dad went through with them. 40+ years carpentry, sheet metal, and HVAC installation, among other talents, and apparently those guys learned a few things that day. Not an inspector, but I went to look at a house once that was for sale. The house was looking good until I looked at the bathroom. The toilet tank was really crooked. It was angled about 15 degrees. Anything you might sit on it would have slid right off. It looked ridiculously bad. I asked the wife owner, any idea why this toilet tank is so crooked? She was silent for a long pause and said, no, it's not crooked. She lied right when I'm looking at it. To be nice, I looked at the rest of the house before leaving. Her husband calls a few hours later. The floor is rotten under that toilet. That's why it's so crooked. My wife forgot. We have a guy fixing it right now. Even if they fixed it, they already lied to me once. How do I know there wasn't something else wrong with the house they were hiding? The only way I noticed the tank is because it was so badly crooked. Going through a home with home inspector, didn't find any issues. Bring my dad in to look through the house too, and he was OCD checking everything. Looks at the Zillow listing with the floor plan. Measures the basement. Finds out the actual measurements smaller than the floor plan, which led us to go looking in a closet and realize they finished a wall and closet around the old oil tank. Never decommissioned it. Never planned to tell anyone about it. And we would have had to rip walls out to get to it to remove it. It was a non-starter and we walked away. So happy to have my dad's sharp eye while home shopping. I went to a house after reports of possible child neglect. I went there and everything seemed fine. The kids were well behaved like little trained soldiers, and did not speak unless given permission by their parents. Just before I left, I noticed the youngest kid get on all fours and eat dog pellets out of a dog bowl. The father then quickly ushered me out of the door while the mom nervously laughed and said their child likes to pretend to be a dog. Major red flag. If it wasn't for that, I would not have escalated the issue. It was eventually determined that the kids were receiving extreme emotional abuse and were fed food not meant for human consumption. Fortunately, they were not beaten or physically abused. They were placed in foster care. Top 4 hits from our house. 1. House was advertised as newly rewired. Upon inspection, house was knob and tube. Someone had just installed standard 3-prong outlets, none of which were grounded. We think the previous owner, deceased, got scammed. 2. Dryer vented into an old chimney. Chimney filled with decades of sooty old lint. 3. No insulation whatsoever, except for one small wall that had balls of old newspaper and Christmas wrapping paper. 4. A DIY roofing job had resulted in a leak down inside a wall. At some point, the previous owners opened the wall, found a rotted out stud, nailed a new stud onto the old one, and closed the wall back up. We found this all out before the sale and bought the house anyway, fair price, but geez. Just go to our homeowners and you'll find new owners who are aghast that the inspector didn't find that if you take a 2-hour shower the hot water heater runs out of hot water, or if there's 20 inches of rain overnight the yard floods, and who can they sue for not disclosing this? 1. furnace exhaust flue inlet at the attic furnace disconnected and a dead bird below it. Would have dumped all the furnace exhaust straight into the attic area. Obvious safety implication. 2. Long-time vacant house in a very secluded area. Reeked of cat piss and burnt plastic. No cats or cat feces in sight and no entry point for cats. Found small balloon in the corner of the floor where the fridge would be. Picked it up, with gloves, and white powder came spilling out. We came to the conclusion there was possibly the presence of methamphetamine in the home at some point and in some fashion. 3. 5-year-old house. Nice neighborhood, great shape, vacant. Everything looked good visually. In the attic, just after it had started raining heavily, a slight but constant drip was noticed from the roof sheathing in one area. Got lucky on that one. Sunny day, there would have been no evidence of any issue whatsoever. 4. Homeowner DIY replaced the microwave and thought it would be clever to run the exhaust vent into the wall cavity between the kitchen and adjacent laundry room. Just dumped the moisture into the wall. Mold city after a while if you do a lot of cooking while using the exhaust fan. 5. 60s house, well renovated. Range was a gas, electric dual fuel setup. Noticed broiler took forever to even start to warm up and never got hot enough that I couldn't touch it real quick. They usually glow red after like 30 seconds. Found out the range was plugged into a 110V outlet. Enough to power the control panel and light, and not the proper 220V outlet, not even present. Oven was essentially useless. That one also had an incomplete drain line from a bathroom sink dumping everything directly into the crawlspace. 6. New build. Got into the attic and just a quick 360-degree scan. Something was off. Looking closer found a truss web beam that was completely gone. Just ripped out. Gusset plates bent to hell. Probably knocked out by the framing crew's crane or something and they thought no one would notice. Time as money, right? Lol. Not me, but one I spoke to. Place almost passed, until out the corner of his eye. Bam! Jack stand holding up a beam under the house. I bought a foreclosed house last summer and the inspector was pretty vague about a lot of things, but as it was the second inspection and the first had gone well I figured okay. I did buy the house without an initial walkthrough as I was out of state, but based on the inspection and the conversation with the inspector again, I figured it was okay. Upon arriving I found that the loosely attached, upstairs toilet was in fact not attached and was just resting on the floor. There was a hole in the wood floor and no flange to attach the toilet to. You could look down into the basement and see the pipe below. 2. The water was turned off and when I insisted that it be turned on before closing I got blowback from the realtor. I said, "You turn it on or we go to court and you and the bank will lose." Before we closed, they gave me 15 minutes to inspect the plumbing. 3. There were so many plumbing issues that it took 3 hours for a decent plumber to get them all, including a cracked cast iron sewer pipe and clogs in the second bathroom, an upstairs bathroom sink. I was without a working toilet for about a week. So, I get that the house wasn't in the greatest shape. I can see that in the specs. But being honest would have made a big difference, right? In the end, I didn't pay a lot for the house and it is all fixable stuff. I have done numerous inspections on commercial properties, but I also do occasion residential evaluations for friends who are looking at buying or fixing up their residence. My expertise is focused on electrical. However, I usually can evaluate the basics of mechanical and plumbing after being in the commercial MEP field for a while, and having many contractors in my family. The biggest problems I see in residential: 1. Bad venting of laundry dryers and exhaust fans. So many times the duct will go into the ceiling space or attic and never makes it outside. Moisture starts to cause rot or lint piles up into a fire hazard. 2. Bad wiring where wire nuts are crammed beyond capacity with whatever wire is available or generally overloaded branch circuits. Even in my own house, I have found discolored insulation on the white neutral wires, which happens when the wire is getting too hot. Homeowners and handymen almost always under torque screws and wire nuts, which cause increased heat from the additional impedance. It is something where you probably won't know something is wrong until you smell burning plastic. Even better when they are splices inside walls behind drywall that are impossible to see. 3. Weird plumbing designs with sewer and vent. Supply lines are usually fine unless they are terminated incorrectly. Saw a house where air admittance valves were used everywhere for a remodel, including underneath a second-story bathtub. Also have seen where a shower was added onto a house, and the plumber never put a P-trap in. The concrete slab had to be jackhammered and a P-trap added. Commercial work. 1. Very large medical facility. One of the mechanical, electrical rooms had a leaking oil-filled transformer and there was a huge condensing unit which was not properly draining. So, there was about a half-inch of water and mineral oil in a room that fed almost all the original facility. Same place had an electrical panel that was underneath a 10 inches sprinkler main that had leaked so that the entire bottom was rusted out and the bus bars exposed. They also had a panel located in a rehab pool area that was completely rusted out due to the chlorine and humidity. Last big problem with the building was there was a hidden 400A electrical tap under some 1600A switchgear that had no protection and no one know about, which meant no one could ever turn off if they ever needed to. 2. Very expensive country club had an indoor rated panel with no panel cover in an outdoor alcove underneath a sprinkler main. It fed a mostly unused portion of the building, but the breakers and bus bars were so corroded and overrun with mineral deposits that we were worried about arc flash even 3 feet in front of it. 3. Numerous instances of shared neutrals with no tie circuit breaker. Electrical panels located in ceiling spaces. Receptacles with no GFCI protection located next to sinks. 4. Refrigerant lines routed directly over large condensing units, which means the refrigerant never could get below a certain temperature and was horribly inefficient. 5. HVAC system where the facilities person opened an outside air damper 100% and left it for a decade so that the system was always fighting against a gaping hole bringing air into the building. 6. A 5,000 volts campus electrical distribution network was put in 10 to 15 years ago, and the electrical engineer specified underground vaults with no drainage. Every vault on the site was filled up almost to the top with stagnant water and completely submerging the wires under a few feet of wire. 7. A pharmacy had the original cast iron sewer line completely rot away because they were dumping acid down the drains. The entire run had to be jackhammered up after the floor collapsed in the corridor outside. 8. More of a design issue. Worked on a natatorium where the equipment room was below the deck level of the pool. A single 1/4 tube caused an incident where the approximately 15 x 15 by 8 feet equipment room flooded and a mostly full 55-gallon drum of chlorine completely dissolved. Every piece of equipment had to be scraped, and even after 2 weeks of airing out, it was still hard to breathe in the room without a mask. Thanks for watching. See you later.